Hi, I'm Kurt, and I'm with Bangert Inc. And today we're here with Bailey at Clear Construction, Santa Barbara, California. Bailey, I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Clear.
Yeah, so I'm Bailey Hochalter. I started this company about 6 years ago at the end of 2017 with a goal to vertically integrate as a construction company. So we started it out with the intention to have design, construction, all the trades, all in-house, so we could be working together on projects, because I recognize the need for some better collaboration. Some competing incentives were making the industry a little bit clunky, I guess I'll say, a little inefficient, and so that's the motivation that I started with, and it's trending that way now, and we're continuing that way.
So what kind of work do you typically do? I mean, what's your clientele like, things like that?
So we're primarily residential at the moment, although we have done a couple of commercial projects. But high-end quality is a big part of our value. Typically, we're working for homeowners just because we have the design piece in-house, but we do also work with architects, and we use our experience in those areas of the process to help collaborate with other design professionals.
So you're kind of a, client comes in, talks to you, you can kind of take the idea that they have and go with it and to the end, close out, clean up, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and we try to start with a feasibility study for the clients, so that we can make sure that we set their expectations at the beginning. And so working with the architectural team and our construction team, we put together a scope and a budget and make sure that we hit that all the way. And what I tell my clients is, in the traditional approach with construction, architects go out to contractors and they ask for some basic cost study budget. And the only incentive at that moment is for the contractor to give a low number, because they know that the plans are going to develop and they want to get their foot in the door. Sure. So what I tell clients is, well, we want to make sure we have that all ironed out at the beginning, because we're going to have to answer for it later on.
So, obviously that's kind of a transparent way of doing business. So a customer knows what they're getting into from a very early stage.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? So how has technology impacted what you do? I mean, is that something that you're like, technology is a core piece? It's just a side thought? What is it for?
I mean, it's like critical to it. In fact, that was one of the first things I recognized at the beginning when I started the company was, in order to have that transparency, especially because we have all these different entities, we had to make sure that all of our programs were communicating well and that they were robust enough to support, the growth that we want to achieve.
Right.
So we knew that we had to make some big investments in really core softwares, core technology. And we work with Procore as one, and it's the communication to the client is key, I think, for that transparency.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've been in this business a long time, and what I've found over the years is residential contractors don't typically put as much emphasis on that. What I would think of as the level of communication a commercial contractor often does, and the control of the project.
Right.
And that's super smart on your part, because you're transparent to begin with. You've got great communication throughout. The customer's not going to get a surprise, halfway through the job. Right?
That's the goal.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah.
So you've just recently adopted Sage Intacct for construction. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the decision behind that and what kind of prompted you to go that direction.
Yeah. So we had QuickBooks initially. We started small, right? It was me and a guy, and so we didn't know what the appropriate time would be to invest in a program like Sage. And at the time, to be honest, we didn't even know about Sage when we first started. But it became very clear about year 2 or 3 that QuickBooks was not going to be able to support the growth that we wanted.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of research about accounting programs, and the thing that I loved about Sage Intacct was that it was browser based, and that it just felt like the future. Yeah. It felt like the thing we could scale on. I'm big on like building a foundation for what we want to achieve, right? Rather than having to like reinforce the foundation as we go.
Yeah, or rebuild it
entirely. Exactly. And so Sage felt like one of those scalable programs that we could base everything on. And then, its integration with Procore and other programs was really appealing. Mm-hmm. But now, also just having gone through it with the implementation with your team and seeing the capability of the program, it's pretty amazing. I mean,
Awesome.
yeah, it's super helpful.
So tell me a little bit about the process. What was your experience with the Banger deployment system, things like that? What do you think about that versus, what could have happened otherwise? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was amazing. In fact, I still, even with our team now, when we have maybe a new member of our accounting team come on, we refer them back to the videos that you guys have, So even aside from the implementation, which is super structured and it's really easy to follow, just the sheer volume of support that you guys have online is invaluable. And I would say the implementation process, the courses, the way they're set up and the cadence of it, I think is really helpful. I mean, I taught myself the whole thing through all those enablement videos on my own, and it felt like it was very self-guided, and it was great, and then the team on top of that, your support team is just very responsive, and it's been a pleasure. Yeah. Well,
I think we take a very similar approach to Sage Intacct, meaning we want things to be transparent from the very beginning, and like deployment lays out the sequence of events. You know exactly what you should be doing, what's next, all that kind of thing. And have you ever done another implementation beyond QuickBooks accounting software or anything like that?
We, to be honest, we haven't done anything as significant as this, but I recognized the importance of having a good support because it was so intense. There's just a lot to it. There's a lot more to it than you even might expect. And that was something that I recognized shortly after signing up was there's more to it than meets the eye. And I'd say the closest thing was maybe our Procore implementation, which it was a very different approach.
What was different about it? What would you like about either one? Things like that.
So the thing that I wasn't crazy about with Procore was, and I don't mean to pick them out specifically, but just generally it's kind of like everything's there. It's a manual that's available, and you can kind of leaf through the whole book, so to speak.
Yeah.
At your leisure.
Right.
But it's not guided, right? So you're sort of just having to fumble through things as you go. And they might give you an implementer, but the problem with that I've recognized is it's not on the spot, right?
Yeah.
You can't have them sitting next to you the whole time and just running through it.
Right.
So that's why even internally, when we have new processes as a company, we do a lot of screen share videos, right? Because that way they can have them in a bank and they can watch them when they need to.
Right.
And that's something that we just haven't seen utilized as well as what you guys have done, And that's what's, I think, the biggest benefit. And then other than that, like you said, the transparency of seeing where you're starting and where you're ending, during the deployment course, what skills you need to have in order to advance to the next course, which is seeing it all ahead of time. It also lets you manage your time because it's a significant time commitment.
There's no doubt about that. I think any accounting system implementation, which we call deployment actually, but they're all time consuming.
Yeah.
And the challenges you run into often, are similar to that. If somebody could either hand you a manual and you're like, okay, where do I start?
Right.
What should I do first or what's after that? Or you're scheduling some kind of a consultant in, on very specific times for very specific, segments of time.
Right.
That can be challenging because it's not always you might have time to do it, but they don't have time to do it, or they have time and you don't have time. And so that just pushes things down the road. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what you're doing in your own business when you vertically integrate. Instead of going, I can't get the plumber in for 3 weeks, you can go, hey guys, we need to go get that done, right?
Yeah. It's the aligned incentives, making sure the resources are available when you need them.
Yeah. I think it's super smart that, I see companies make decisions about software because on price, okay, well, brand X is cheaper, so we're going to buy brand X, for instance. Not really thinking about that long-term impact of the decision, because if they find themselves 3-4 years later going, we really need something better than this. Well, now they've just really spent a whole lot more money than they ever anticipated. So it's smart to get started with that. Sage is a super solid construction foundation, no doubt about it.
Yeah. And
I know, for instance, we have customers that have been on a Sage product now for 35 plus years.
Yeah. Wow.
They've gotten a huge value out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge value. And so when you're starting with that kind of solid foundation, you're really setting yourself up for long-term success. You don't have to do this again. Like you don't have
exactly. That's
right?
huge. And then the other nice thing is, it can't really be overstated, is like the tools available in Sage are like, they just blow anything else out of the water that we've used. And what's so nice about that is, like, I've always been the kind of person that buys like the quality tool, right?
Yeah.
Or something that I can, like you said, invest in long term, because especially given where we want to go as a company, like, implementations are expensive. It doesn't matter how good. It's obvious why you guys have put so much effort into making this a smooth process, because they're very difficult.
Yeah.
So the tools, though, that's where I've actually seen the most benefit, just because when we were scaling out of QuickBooks, and there were these tools that we didn't even know we could have, right? Because they just didn't have them offered. Right. And so what we had to do was set up all these kind of inefficient systems internally. And so we'd have to use our accounting team in ways that you really shouldn't be using an accounting team, right? Like, they're trying to manage their own processes, and there's human error. And so then you have to go fix those things. So what's great about Sage Intacct, because we're in the refinement stage at this point.
Yeah.
We've implemented it. We're working through it. But I'm learning about all these new features. And it's really cool, because I'm setting up systems for my team where it just happens. Like, they don't even know what's happening. They just go. I just sit down with them with a meeting, and I say, here's what you do. You put these in. You enter your data here. And, I'll show them how it's working, just so they have that edification. But they don't have to think about it every time. And that is huge, because then you can hire data entry people rather than CFOs.
There you go.
A team of CFOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, back to that kind of cost differential, there are legacy products out on the market for construction that are definitely cheaper than Sage Intacct. Yeah. There are products that are definitely more expensive. But people look at that, and what they don't realize is, oftentimes at least, that one, you're going to keep your accounting staff small.
Exactly.
And you're right, you can hire at a different level. And that because the software is managing it for you, and it's doing what software should have done all along, which is making your life easier.
Exactly.
That's the whole promise of technology. My dad, who started this company with me years and years ago, had a saying, productivity through applied technology. That just was something that's always stuck with me. And it's kind of always been that promise, kind of what's driven us over all these years. So I love to hear it when you're going, we just put this stuff in, it works. I show them out the results, and they're like, okay, that's awesome.
They're totally bought in. Yeah, and I haven't gone through a lot of these softwares, because accounting is one piece of construction, but there's all kinds of stuff that you have to deal with. Timekeeping, mileage tracking, all these other peripheral things. What I've realized over the years, and I heard this from someone, I don't remember who, like, you should find a program that, even if it does 100 things, and it might do, half of them really well, and the other half it does good enough.
You're right.
Like, you should lean into those products, because just the crossover between softwares is so time consuming. But what I'll say about Sage Intacct is that, not only is it offering all these things, there's so many tools within it that have already sort of rendered other tools that we had obsolete. Like, we've literally been able to get rid of subscriptions we have with other companies because of the tools that are offered in Sage. Yeah. And I'll say, like, they actually do them better in a lot of cases.
Sure.
Like, one example is like the compliance records tool, which I know is actually, I think, relatively new tool.
Relatively new, right.
But we've been able to actually get rid of a program we used before for the same thing.
For the specific purpose. Yeah. And you can get rid of what we call point solutions, which are those things that kind of do one thing really well.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of times. But then, I don't know if you were informed about Sage Copilot, the AI integration.
Lisa mentioned it to me from the.
Yeah, that, I'm just super impressed at the speed at which Sage is pushing forward into, what I call technology future.
Yeah.
So, like, as that gets integrated into the system, you're going to have the system telling you things you want to know rather than you having to ask the system. And I think that, at least in my mind, and I've said this a million times over the last 25 years, which is, you really want software that tells you when you need to pay attention to something.
Yeah.
Okay. That's been really hard to achieve. And I liken it to, like, you have two different superintendents. One guy, they're both good, But one guy comes to you and says, hey, we've got a challenge here.
Right.
Here's what's going on. They inform you, right? Mm-hmm. The other guy, he doesn't tell you anything unless you specifically ask. You know, which one of the two, they're both skilled, which one of the two has greater value? It's that guy that's coming to you and talking to you, man. So as, you know, Sage drives forward with their tech, you know, I think you're just going to see more and more value come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a feedback loop. You can't fix what you don't know about. Right? You know
yeah,
what I mean?
that's true.
So
when, you know, you found deployment straightforward, would you recommend it to other people? I mean,
absolutely.
If you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't imagine using anything else at this point. And I mean, the deployment was just super easy. I mean, even we were experiencing implementation issues with other companies that we were trying to kind of coordinate between. And it became even more obvious how successful like the implementation program for you guys was. Because it was just, I had a clear juxtaposition.
Yeah.
So I would highly recommend it. Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, the program and you guys as the support.
Great. You know, with deployment, we definitely departed from what I'll call the industry norm and how software is implemented. And, you know, as a risk, it's kind of walking out on the plank. Is this going to really work or not? That kind of thing. And your feedback is so consistent with everyone else that's been through it. Yeah. You know, it's just really satisfying for our team because the team is what has made it. They've executed this thing perfectly.
Yeah.
I can't say more. But it also helps us drive the cost of it down significantly, you know, because deployment is about 1/4 to 1/3 the cost of what a typical implementation would be. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, or recognize that.
I'm actually not. I don't have a lot of experience with the costs, but it doesn't seem unreasonable based on what we're getting, the value we're getting out of it.
Because if you're in a situation where you're hourly or you're paying what I call a metered subscription, which is basically you're paying a monthly fee to get a certain amount of time. If anything goes sideways on your end, like we've had customers go through a software implementation and they either hire new people, they replace people, they have somebody leave. Well, then they have to start back 5 steps to bring that new person up to speed. And they have to pay for that because they're getting billed by the hour. All right. Stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
And with deployment, there's no additional cost. You just put them right back through.
Yeah.
Chug along, and you know it doesn't disrupt things that much.
Yeah, because it's very helpful to have that flexibility.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, like how disruptive do you think deployment was for you? You know, versus your expectations.
In terms of business flow, or what do you mean?
Yeah, well, like, was it something that really interrupted your day-to-day operations, like going through the deployment process? Was it highly disruptive, like 11 out of 10, or was it pretty mild? There will be some disruption.
I mean, that's the thing is I want to make sure it's clear. Like there are disruptions regardless. That's why such an investment needs to be made. But I would say, I mean, I went through it personally, and I found it to be very undisruptive in terms of like the speed at which I learned the tools, right? Mm-hmm. And how fast I was able to actually start using them. And I didn't necessarily expect it to be bad. So that's why it wasn't like my expectations where it was going to be this horrible thing. But I would say my expectations were met because I go into things like, I'm very analytical about it. And I would say when I looked at the whole thing from the start, I said, well, this shouldn't be like an overly complicated process because it's just about learning, right? And it's about learning in the right order and making sure that you have the information available to you. So it's not like this, groundbreaking concept, right?
Yeah,
like you were saying, like, well, you went with this deployment process sort of on a whim, but the fact is, like, you use common sense and you say, well, this just makes sense. This process makes sense. And so that was how I approached it. And it just met that expectation for me, which was, I never came across something that was like frustrating. I guess that's kind of the bottom line for me.
Yeah, well, and that's great.
It's about the frustration. That's the part that I don't respond well to, because that just means that something, was missing.
It's not well made, so to speak.
Or it was out of order, but I didn't experience any of that. So I would say disruption, I mean, if I'm rating a 1 to 10, as 10 being like the best possible, I would say it's probably a 10, based on
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. So
Yeah, no.
yeah,
Nice work.
the deployment process is very intentionally designed for what it does. And I liken it a lot to a construction project. You know, you can't put the roof on until the structure's in place.
Yeah.
You can't put the structure in place, the foundation's in. You can't, you know, I mean, there's a sequence of events that you have to follow pretty much every single time. And, you know, and you can't do the foundation till you have the permits and, you know, I mean, and you have a design and, you know, so forth. There's a sequence of events to make a project. And this is you know, software implementations are a project to come out well in the end.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's exactly how it's designed. So it keeps you on the right track. You know, we don't let you go somewhere else, do something else and do it out of sequence.
Yeah. And that's super important too, because the engagement, I mean, you guys can only do so much.
Yeah, that's right.
At the end of the day, the company needs to be engaged in the process. And so that's why I think, honestly, I feel like a lot of the frustration that I've heard, not with this, but just in general with implementations is it's like they're not putting in the effort that's required to get out of it. So for me, I mean, that is the first step. And if that's not there, then there's nothing you guys can do to make it better, right?
You're absolutely right. That's the best piece of advice that you've given the audience.
Yeah.
In this whole thing. I'm going to tell you that right now. Your people are the key.
Yes.
And it's, I don't care how good the process is, and we obviously think deployment's really good, but without that team commitment on your part, the people with the right attitude, the right skill set, the, you know, abilities that are needed and in the right seat in your company, it's very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, and I will say that's one thing that you guys did well is you had the feedback, you know, when you felt like there was an area or someone that was potentially not keeping up or engaged like they should be. I mean, because I think it's probably from experience, I'm assuming, that you guys have seen it happen. You've seen it go haywire because you said, we can't do it for you.
Yeah.
Right? If you guys aren't keeping up with the course, I mean, they're students, right? You guys are
that's right.
You guys are building the curriculum and they're the students. And if they're not going to conduct themselves responsibly, then there's nothing you can do, right?
There really isn't, other than, you know, we can coach as much as we can coach.
Yeah.
We can give them the tools as much as we can, but, you know, we can't make them do the work.
Right.
You know, we're not in that position. And, you know, deployment helps. I mean, the structure of deployment and the fact that it's available to you 24/7 and all that helps, because we recognize people are, you know, they're busy every day. You got a business to run, you've got things to do. And when you find time, you can jump into deployment and work on it versus waiting for a consultant and all that, which is the old way of doing things. Is you're scheduling specific times.
Yeah, which just doesn't work. That doesn't work well in my experience.
You know, so if you have a time schedule and you know, at this point in time, but you have a customer call you and they want to see you at that same time, you're going to go see the customer, you know, and you should. But then you may not get that consultant back for another few days or a week or two.
I mean, it would just prolong the entire process.
Yeah,
and that was the thing that was so great about this self-guided approach, is that I could do it at any hour. Yeah. You know, I'm not expecting, you know, I wouldn't expect everyone to work as much as I do, but, you know, I was like working a full day, and then I was like spending like literally 6 hours in the evening just going through like everything myself. That's something I never could have done that if it was the old, you know, consultant approach. No. I'm not going to get a consultant for 6 hours from 5 to 11.
No, you're not. Yeah.
So.
You're a lot like another customer, Josh Smyser with TNT, Tuck Pointing, relatively young companies, both with a technology bent, a drive toward technology, understanding that tech is going to be what carries the company forward into the future.
Yeah.
You know, lots of similarities, lots of same reasons for investment, all that kind of thing. It's great to hear you guys. I should connect you guys.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love to connect like-minded people.
Yeah, he's really similar. In fact, he related to us just his investments in technology over the last, 12 to 18 months have actually made a very direct impact on his revenues.
Wow.
So, and he goes, and I keep my office staff really, really efficient, really tight because of the Sage Intacct system.
Yeah.
So he's super happy. He's like, I wouldn't need to hire anybody for a long time because I could triple my revenues. And
I mean, I'm saying that now we're probably a little bit like closer to the, we just sort of implemented. So
right.
I'm seeing that happen already,
Mhm.
but I haven't, I would say talk to me in 6 months and we'll probably have more of those stories to tell. But
Sure. Yeah, of course. So as a part of Clear, I mean, do you, how are you structured as a company?
Yeah.
What's that like?
So we actually have 4 separate companies. And so the multi-entity approach of Sage was critical. That was actually a huge component for us choosing the software. But so we have Clear Construction, we have Clear Architecture, we have Clear Millwork, and then we have Clear Administration. And so the way that we have structured it is that because I'm really big on shared incentives, I'm not in this to be the sole. I am currently the sole owner, but ultimately I'm trying to give ownership to our directors because that to me like builds, first of all, like long-term engagement, which is hugely important. Like, right. But also just, rewarding people for good work that they do, recognizing like, hey, you're in control of your own financial destiny. So anyway, I wanted to separate the companies completely so that they would have like complete ownership over these production companies. So we've got, our head of architecture, our head of millwork, and our head of construction. And the 3 of them are all responsible for the net profits of their individual profit centers. Right?
Yeah, right.
And so the way that we allocate our overhead expenses is that Clear Administration receives all of our overhead expenses. Mm-hmm. And then this is where we've gotten into like dynamic allocations. Like these are some of the refinement things we're using now, where we can allocate based on predetermined formulas. Like, okay, how much of rent goes to each of these entities?
Right.
And so you can throw them all into the buckets. And how we're actually doing is we've set up projects in administration that literally bill the individual entity heads. So they receive an invoice from Clear Administration saying, here's all your overheads. They can sign off on it and then send it back to our accounting department as an AP bill. They receive it and put it into the system. And so now you're transferring, and this is like the depths of the tools that I've gotten into is like I've built transaction definitions for both so that we can transfer the expenses from administration over instead of getting revenues. And it's just really cool. Like it gets me really excited, like all these possibilities, and that's what it's. I think there's absolutely no way I could have done this with QuickBooks, right? This is like no way. I don't even know. I mean, there are other accounting softwares that I looked into that I'm pretty sure couldn't do anything similar. So having that available and allowing us to be creative about our approach to this like vertically integrated company is invaluable. I mean, yeah, it was all based on the capabilities of this program. So
great.
It would have been, our company would look different if it weren't for it.
Yeah, or you'd have a lot more, labor involved in figuring all that stuff out, right?
Yeah, I mean, and these tools are great. This is one of the things I was sort of referencing earlier is I set all this up in the background. Yeah. So literally all I have to do is tell my AP clerk, enter the bill like any other bill. Right. Just make sure you select the right client. Sure. And then same thing on the AR side. I just said, bill them like any other client. Right. It's just a project. Like, don't worry about what's going on in the background.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It really is. I like your enlightened approach to business as well. You're right on the right track with all that. People need to feel that they have ownership of process at least, or they're building something and you're doing it together. That kind of thing makes such a difference.
Yeah. I mean, I just know myself, I know that's how I'm motivated. I think financially, everyone needs to have a fair paycheck, obviously. Yeah. Right? I mean, I think that's super important. No one would be at their work if they didn't. But what I've always said is if someone's inherent motivations are not aligned with their financial motivations, then it's going to build resentment on one side or the other, right? If we're overpaying someone, I'm going to be resentful. If we're underpaying someone, they're going to be resentful. Yep. It doesn't matter how hard they push. Because that's the thing is, I'm not motivated. I'm really not motivated by money. And I know a lot of people on my team are not motivated by money. Yeah. But that's not to say that I don't want to reward them,
Well, sure. So. Yeah. I think, that's exactly right. I think we're very aligned with that same thought. In our industry, there's a lot of practices which are, I think, counter to good culture in many ways, And so what we've very consciously done in building this deployment system is actually a part of that. Mm-hmm. The biggest motivation for us to build deployment was we recognized that the old way of doing things was completely unsustainable. We had stressed out people working nights, having to solve unsolvable problems, mm-hmm. which is that's a terrible job. If you have a job that's there to solve unsolvable problems, it's horrible.
Yeah.
One of our biggest motivators for deployment was to turn all that around, go back to our roots. So when we started 40 years ago, if you bought a system from us, you got one price and it included everything. The software, services, the whole thing. There's no change orders. There wasn't any other cost. You knew it right up front. And we got away from that over time into this, what I think of as the old way of doing things, which is we make an estimate of how many hours you're going to need. We assign you a consultant that may or may not work out that way, all that kind of stuff. And you can never accurately estimate because we don't know your team well enough.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
We don't know if you're motivated or not motivated, you're tech savvy or not tech savvy. We just don't know.
Sure.
But culture impact is so huge. And it's for us, what we pay people definitely a fair wage. We want people to be rewarded. And then just seeing people having fun, doing their work, man, as an owner, I love it.
Oh, it's the best thing.
Yeah.
Culture begets the culture, A players want to work with A players, happy people want to work with happy people. So I think that's the biggest part of this.
And a happy company makes happy customers.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
they're pleasant to deal with.
Yeah.
You're not calling up one of our people or chatting with them and they're, frazzled. And
Totally.
Like you're the last person I want to talk to. They're like, hey, how's it going, Bailey?
Yeah, one of our core values is this thing called brilliance. And it sort of encapsulates like intelligence, brightness, but also like a positivity. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's really important for me. Like I want to make
great.
sure when someone walks in the room to represent our company that it's like the room lights up.
Yeah.
Like they're not grumpy,
I like that.
They're like,
I like that a lot. That's fantastic insight, and I commend you for it because, a lot of times we're focused on how do we make all these jobs, maximize our profit and all that. How do I, get push for that. But I think when you take a culture forward approach, things just start working out for you.
Well, yeah. The irony of it is that the things that we're talking about create profits.
Yeah.
Ultimately. It's just
you're
sort of starting the domino fall earlier. Mm-hmm. So it's harder to see that's where it's going to end up. Whereas most people go to the end and they just try to push over the last domino. It's like you got to know what goes into building the company and what goes into, like you said, happy clients so that you can build it from the ground up. It's a long-term thing.
Definitely a long-term. And I think that's what I tell our people is patience. A long-term view and patience are the key here. The way we're doing things, we're not out, push and get as many sales this month as we can, all that kind of thing. We have tons of patience. If we're doing the right thing and we're building the right culture and we're treating our customers properly, that'll all come.
And what I will just say, dealing with your company, is that I've recognized that everyone I've dealt with has been like, this is like, it makes complete sense that this is like your motivation because this is how it's coming off like on a person by person basis. When I talk to Lisa or Mike or Bojan or anyone, they're all happy to help. There's no resistance. It's like, let's get you what you need. It's great. It's refreshing. Because a lot of times there are. I deal with a lot of companies. So I have a lot of comparison. So
you don't feel like you're the last person they want to hear from right now, right? Yeah.
Lisa. She's amazing. She was dealing with a problem I had while she was at the Vegas conference. She's like, I'm in a break. I'm like, I just got out of a presentation. I can help you right now. And she's like, I was like, no, you can wait till tomorrow. Like, it's great. So.
Culture is key, absolutely key, and that for us and certainly for me personally, just trumps everything for me. I love to see our team. They literally they're having fun doing what they're doing.
Yeah,
and I'm glad it's coming through to you.
Totally, and I like to work with companies that appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So, hey, Bailey, thank you so much for taking the time with us. I really appreciate it. Love what you're doing here at Clear Construction. I think you're right on the right track. I love the fact that you're all about culture here. and then employing technology to help build that. That's so refreshing to see.
Yeah, well,
So,
thank you guys for coming out, and I appreciate everything you're doing to support us, indirectly and directly.
all right. Well, hey, thanks much, and we'll see you on the next one.